I found it Oh, meeting, what's that? I found it interesting that Mike started birding when he was 8 years old because his grandfather gave him a golden field guide and a pair of binoculars. So that's really good. And then Mike's traveled quite a bit. He's been to North America and South America, Caribbean, Africa is thrown in, and of course, United States, Canada, Belize, Nicaragua, Yucatan, and Panama, Dominican Republic, and Kenya. Wow, that's a lot. Sounds good. And his current life list now includes more than 900 species. That's quite a lot. And if you want to know more about Mike, he has a site called The Bird Blogger. So Mike, go ahead and welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Anne. I appreciate it. So most of you know me as the Christmas bird count guy. When I'm not Christmas bird counting, I like to travel. Carly, my partner, is definitely getting interested, which is good. So we can go to the same spots and bird the same areas. I like that. I've been in several places, as Anne mentioned, and one of my favorite places is Central America. And so I thought I'd do a little presentation on the 3 countries that I've hit down there, not including Mexico. And we'll get started. I just have to share my screen here. And I think that's the one. So can someone just confirm that that is working for me? Okay,
Yes,
great.
yes, we see an.
Okay. Yep, we get a spectacled owl there.
Yeah.
And we'll just we'll start off. It's one of the good stories that I have during my travels here. So I love that owl. So yeah, Central America birding tour. I've been to 3 of the 6 Central American countries. I have wishes to go to the other 3 soon. I want to collect all countries down in Central America, and then we're going to start in South America. During my travels, I list birds and photograph them. There is certainly some people that love to just look at the birds, but I do keep a list, and as Anne said, I'm over 900. I'm 955 now, with a couple new ones from Colorado when Carly and I were just down there. So that 14 countries with Central America as a focus currently. Costa Rica, Belize, Panama, Nicaragua, Mexico, but El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras I have left. This will be about the birds mostly, but I am not a 1% naturalist. I do have a couple furries. We call them furry birds, and we'll show you those as we go here. If you do have questions, guys, I won't have my presentation up, so just unmute yourself and ask away. I have no problem taking a little bit of time. Anne told me I got to fill this thing with 45 minutes. I had no idea how I was going to fill 45 minutes, and then I put my slides together, and I have to time myself now because I've got like 95 slides. So here we go. So on the agenda, Belize, I was down there in 2013. Panama 2015 and Nicaragua in 2018. I have a little drawing. Can you see my mouse? Does that show up as well? Okay. So Belize I hit first. It was a great little country to hit. Of course, it's English speaking as well as Creole. I've got a good story. I'll tell it when I'm in that section. And then I have Panama was next. That's down just before you hit South America, and then Nicaragua, and a couple good stories from both of those as well.
That beautiful shot, eh? Mm-hmm.
So our first country is going to be Belize. Again, I was down there in 2013. We have quite a few birds down there. In fact, a lot of these countries have over 800 species of birds, which is tantamount to the entire country of Canada. Belize, you can fit in 1 quarter of Vancouver Island, and it has the same amount of species as Canada. I found that absolutely fantastic. So locations in Belize, they have a lot of literal names. Burl Boom was one of the starts there. We flew into Belize City, stayed in a little place in Burl Boom, went to San Ignacio, where I actually got a couple tours. Went to El Pilar, which was a Mayan ruin. Spanish Lookout, a couple pictures and a little comment about that. Mountain Pine Ridge, which is very unusual for that area. You don't see a whole bunch of mountains in Belize. It's pretty flat everywhere else. And then the Jaguar Reserve, and then south to the bottom of the country, Punta Gorda, which was Jacintoville and Blue Creek. So my first stop was Black Orchid Resort. It was kind of nice. It was close to the airport. It was relatively inexpensive during the time, and I hit a couple different places while I was there. This Double Head Cabbage, that is the actual name of the town. God knows how they came up with that. I'm guessing they grew some veggies there. While I was there, we stopped and had a look at the rivers. And this guy here was drying himself off. It was raining torrentially just before this, and so he was sitting on the edge of a nice riverbank, drying off. Black-colored hawk, this guy is. The same river as the Northern Jacana. Very long legs and very spindly little toes, and obviously that beautiful yellow shield on his head is offset with the black. On my next stop was Crystal Paradise. We stopped there for kind of a base camp, and I had a guide that actually was part of the family. They were fantastic, the Tuts. Papa Tut was the guy that ran the place, and he had his son actually take out the tours. The bird on the bottom is very, very common. It's like American robin here. That is a clay-colored thrush, and they're everywhere. Mountain Pine Ridge, again, we went up there and we're looking for some owls, but we didn't get any. Sorry, guys, dogs. Didn't get any owls, but certainly saw a couple cool things. One of the things that we did get to is 1,000-foot falls. It's a little intimidating looking over the edge of that cliff, but absolutely gorgeous. And one of the things that was really interesting was there were swifts flying around in the kind of the canyon here, and bat falcons that were watching the swifts, because that's what they eat, is swifts. The blue-black grosbeak, we have some grosbeaks here, which looks similar, but this guy is absolutely jet black, kind of a neat color for him. This is a rusty sparrow, part of the Zonotrica family, which is same thing as our white crowns and golden crowns, just they live down in the tropics, but kind of neat colors in their face there. We then went one morning to El Pilar, and the cool thing about El Pilar is it's a Mayan ruin, complete with a full pyramid. They have a actual city that surrounds this place, but what they've done is they've left it in most of its state with the trees over top of it to protect it from people and also the elements. So they've done ground penetrating radar on this, and they have the full city mapped out. But what you see is this, and when you climb, you're climbing on top of rocks that they actually put in, because again, it's very flat there. And you look over the side of Guatemala on one side of this. During the walk, lots of trogons down there, lots and lots of trogons. And you'll see several kind in all of the countries that I was in. But this is the slaty-tailed, beautiful little eye ring on that guy. This is a rufous-tailed jacamar. They're kind of cool because they'll sit and just twist their heads, and they keep that beak sitting straight up. All of a sudden, they'll see a butterfly or a bug or something, and they'll dash off to go get it and fly back and smack it on the branch, and then it'll sit still for 10 minutes, just like that. Kind of cool looking. So while we were up on the top of the pyramids, we looked up, and sure enough, there was a family of black howler monkeys. And my guide says, "Hey, watch this." And so he started calling like a monkey, and this guy started calling like a, when you get the dog and the sirens going and all the dogs start going. And well, that's what it was like, my guide and the monkeys. And it was just a crazy little top of the mountain thing. It was awesome. One second. There we go. So Spanish Lookout is a little place down just close to where we were. And he didn't say anything when we came in, and we were driving through pretty much what is rural Central America with palm trees and jungle and houses that are very colorful and but very small. And then we came up to this main street, and I swore I was in Manitoba. And what has happened is in the 50s, the Mennonites that were in Manitoba decided, and Ontario decided that was it. We were out. We want to have freedom around our religion and what we want to do. And so they talked to the Belizean government. They said, "Sure, come on down. You'll just have to pay taxes. But as far as we're concerned, you can come down." And they've essentially opened this place up, and it looks like Manitoba or Ontario. Kind of cool looking. And he was very excited about showing me the ice cream. I guess that's a bit of a treat down there. This is not a fork-tailed flycatcher. Actually, this is a groove-billed Annie. So I guess I have to do a little quality control on my naming. But this was out in the middle of the fields. They sit on fences. Kind of a cool looking bird. There's also a smooth-billed Annie that hangs out down there. This is a fork-tailed flycatcher. They transfer from here up to Texas, but it was absolutely crazy. There was flocks of more than 250 of these birds fly catching all at the same time over the fields and the ponds. It was kind of cool. So Crystal Paradise was the place that I stayed, and one of the cool things was in the morning that I left, they actually set out on the deck with papayas and bananas, and I had my morning coffee and Papa Tut. We would talk in the morning for a couple minutes, and he says, just wait around here, we'll get a couple treats going. So while we were sitting there, we had the first visitors, and you can see it's a little dark there, but the brown jays started showing up, and so noisy. Crazy noisy, just like the rest of the jays. And then following him, we had some Montezuma's Oropendolas. And following him, of course, the clay-colored thrush, or clay-colored robin, sorry. And we had a tropical mockingbird kind of hanging around the same area. He's very similar to the other mockingbirds. They just have a little bit of difference in their tail. But these guys started showing up in the trees, and they were absolutely gorgeous. And they'd come down and they'd pack the papaya up into little chunks, and they'd throw it up in the air and down the gullet. And they were sitting no more than 5 feet from me, and they were awesome to watch. So they're part of the toucan family, but they're a little bit smaller, so they have a little bit of a different name. From there, we went up to Bocawina Rainforest Resort. The coolest thing about this place was I was there for dinner. They had a little restaurant, and you walked out, and if you've been down to Disneyland and you go into the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and you smell the smells and the mosses hanging from the trees, and the fireflies are all going off and the frogs are singing, it's almost like you're in that ride at Disneyland. It was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. Some of the birds down there, now this is very similar to that blue-black grosbeak, but this is actually a blue-black grass keat, more like one of our buntings that we see here, the lazuli bunting. This is not the crimson-collared tanager. I'm not sure why that happened, but that's the Oropendola. This is the yellow-throated euphonia, a female down here on the left-hand side and the male up top on the right. They travel around in pairs. They're basically the finch down there. The Cecropia tree that you're looking at here is actually really a popular tree with the birds. And you can see that the fruit grows long, stringy sections, and it continuously grows. There's no time in the year in which it doesn't have fruit on it, but it all ripens from the bottom up. And you'll see that they pulled off some of this fruit on the right-hand side, and it kind of wraps around those little branches. And when it's ripe, it'll actually come off, where the ones on the left are a little bit less ripe, and they can't take that quite off. But scrocia is very common down there. There's my crimson colored tanager. Beautiful bird. It was a little far away, so it's a bit grainy. But the tanagers down there, we get our Western tanager here, and occasionally we'll get a fancy tanager. Down there, they're somewhat common as far as the number of species. I think there's 203 different tanagers that live down there in the tropics, and they're all different colors and shapes and sizes. It's just absolutely gorgeous. This is a crane hawk. So this is part of my story that I wanted to tell. So I'm from California. I've lived down there quite a bit, and I know enough Spanish just to be dangerous. And when I first came down here, the guys that took me on the tour spoke English, so I wasn't, too concerned about that. But I was driving down the road and I was trying to find the jaguar reserve, and I couldn't find it. It was some little side road that I just could not find. And so there was this little short Mexican lady walking down the street. She was probably as tall as she was wide, very happy, smiley. And I stopped and got out of my truck and tried to ask her in my very worst Spanish, ¿Dónde está el parque de Jaguar Nacional? And she looks at me, she says, "What are you trying to find?" Because everyone speaks English. They just look like they're Spanish down there. So I thought that was kind of a funny part of my trip. So this is the delineated woodpecker. We have something similar here that we see on a regular basis, the pileated woodpecker. But it is a slightly different flavor. Got that big red puffy crust, not so smooth. So then south in southern Belize, there was Blue Creek and Jacintoville. Of course, battle egrets are actually introduced from Africa. They're global. The only continent they don't live on now is Antarctica, and here is no different. There was tons of them. They were flying all over the place. Hummingbirds, absolutely fantastic down in Central America. I think we counted in some of the countries over 55 different species of hummingbirds. We get our 5 here, and that's only if they're traveling through. So such a treat to see them. This is a white-necked Jacobin. Not sure why they call it a Jacobin. I'll have to look that up. One of my favorite birds is the a Manakin. White-collared Manakin is the one that I saw down here. He was tucked into the bush, but these are the ones that have leks, just like they call the grouse when they do their dance on the leks. And these guys use a space that they've cleaned off. They'll actually clean the leaves off and use a branch or a tree trunk and a ground, and they'll pop around from one to the other, snapping their wings to attract females. If you've looked at the YouTube video of the dancing Michael Jackson dancing bird, also a Manakin, and one of the most rare birds in the world is actually a Manakin that lives in Brazil, on the bucket list. Turkey vultures, not that pretty, but they still have feathers, so they count. They are everywhere down there, every country, every place, everywhere. So pretty hard to not get away with a picture of some turkey vultures. My total species counts for that trip was 203 species in less than 2 weeks. I think I was there for 10 days. So 203 is pretty good. It's still only 1/5 of the total species. Next country, Panama. So a couple years later, I went to Panama by myself, stopped in at Panama City, and I'll show you my trip here on the next slide. So went to Panama City, went north to Cologne. That's the Atlantic side of the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal there is the Gatun Gates. Very cool. I've got a couple pictures in there. It was absolutely impressive to have a ship actually higher than your head floating through the roadways, and then the gates, you actually drive in front of the gates that's holding all that water back with the ship. A little nerve-wracking. Yeah, to tell you, it was the water was coming out the middle of the gates, and you don't want to get stuck in that position. The next place I stopped was Gamboa. That is one of the locations where they started to dig the canal. That's where all the Americans were stationed, and if you've heard about it, they actually had a horrible time with malaria and actually eradicated malaria by eradicating every mosquito. I can guarantee you that is no longer the case. The mosquitoes have moved back in. I was great food for them when I was down there. The next place I went was Las Planas. That's up here on we would call it the west coast, or the west side of it. If you can tell, there's a bit of a lighter green and a darker green on this map. That divide is so distinct that the clouds will come across as a rainforest cloud and disappear within 20 feet of coming over that ridge. It's dry and warm on one side and wet, wet, wet on the other. It's absolutely incredible. The last place that I've got in here is Paquete. On that upper edge, that's kind of the same. Sorry. So it's the place that the one bird that I wanted to see was the resplendent questel. It's typically something that you want to see if you're down there, and I dipped on it, didn't get to see it. And Anton Valley was the last place I stopped. It's actually a location where it's the largest city in a caldera. It's actually an extinct volcano that built the city. It's also good for birding, so I stopped there. Good for expats too. And then my last day there, I actually stayed at a bit of a nice hotel. I usually like to stay on some cheap stuff, the locals, but the last day I splurged a little bit, so I stayed at the Summit Rainforest Hotel, Golf and Resort. Cologne, here's the gates, and this little truck here on the left-hand side, that is actually running across to get from one side to the other, and that the water actually gets built up behind those gates as you drive through. And when the water's spilling out in between the middle of those gates, it is unnerving for sure. You can see the boat in the back left-hand side, that's going up into the lake. And this side on the right is the side that comes down and into the Atlantic. Again, here's my buddy, the black vulture, all over the place. Another trogon. One of the things that's neat about the trogons is they move like a little mechanical doll. Their heads come around real slow like, and just like the Yakima, they fly off in a flurry of feathers and catch their bug and then come back and sit down and are slow. This is a white whiskered puffbird. Very, very cool. Stood that still so that I could take that picture for probably 15 minutes, didn't move a muscle, and I was within about 5 feet of him. This guy, I was driving up the road and I saw this thing on the road and it wasn't moving. And so I stopped the car to get out and take a look, and turns out that the sloths have to cross the road too. But it took him, I actually waited there with my car to make sure no one hit him, and it took him almost 20 minutes to get from one side of the road to the other. I know now, because I've watched the show on sloths, you can actually pick them up. They're okay, they won't hurt you. Next time, I'm not waiting 20 minutes. The guy's going to get a little lift across the road for sure. This is a Gartered Trogon. Again, lots of those down there. So this is another great story. This is, I'm just outside the Gatun Locks, and I can hear some frogs. And so I thought, well, I should go take a look at the frogs. And it turns out that it wasn't actually frogs, it was birds. And this was the first guy I saw, and there was this one, and then there was another one, and then there was 15 of them. They were all making a racket. And then I realized that the frog sound was actually toucans. So if you ever heard them in the forest, they actually sound just like frogs, and their alarm calls are very similar to that. And there was 15 of these guys hanging around, and it was kind of weird because they were all looking at the same place, and I thought, I wonder what they're looking at. So I walking through the forest, and all of a sudden this guy pops out. He flies right by me, heads off into the forest. So of course I'm chasing him. I trucking through the bush, and this is heavy, thick forest. And he lands, and I get all set up, and I lean up against a tree, and I get my camera going, and I'm taking pictures, and I'm all excited. And all of a sudden I feel this, someone stabbed me with a knife in my ring. I had a ring on, and it actually felt like someone stabbed me in the finger. I looked down, and it was an ant. And I went, oh my God, that's horrible. And then it started really hurting. And I'm like, oh, whatever. And I brushed it off, and I dealt with the pain, and I leant back up against the tree. And I started looking at this. I brought my binoculars up to my face. And again, right in my eye, right just above my eye, I got smacked again. I looked, and sure enough, there was an ant in there. And what I had done is I'd leaned up against this tree with a whole line of ants going up and down this thing, and they were all over me, and they were biting me like crazy. It turns out they were bullet ants. And but it was worth the bullet ants to get the picture of this owl. So that's my little story about the owl. This is Gamboa. This is the area where they've actually built the canal. It was all land the same level as the rest of it, and they built this canal right through. So there's a picture of this bridge with a huge river beside it. It was all dug out by people. It is one of the premier places to bird, though, in Panama. Pipeline Road is you must see if you're going to do birding. These guys are pretty common down there. Not super pretty, but they're pretty enough. Palm tanagers, but they're everywhere. This is actually, believe it or not, a female of the species blue dapsnest. And the male is 10 times prettier than this, but I never did get a picture of them. But that is a female. These guys were obviously stunning, violet-bellied hummingbirds. There was a bit of a hummingbird location where they fed them down there, and there was 5 or 6 different species. But these guys were fantastic. They had the right light on them, and I got some great pictures. One of the things down there is there's a lot of army ants, and you do have to be careful. I mean, you can outrun them for sure, but you don't want to get stuck in the middle of a colony. But there are birds that are actually rely on the ants to get their food, and they will only follow army ants around now. And what happens is, as the ants kind of travel through the bush, the insects and the mammals and the whatever try and get away from them, and they come up out of the bush, and if they can fly, they go. If they climb, they go up the branches. And these guys, if you can see the hook on the top of that beak, they're ferocious, and they'll follow the army ants around collecting stuff they don't get as they go. This was a white-nosed coyote, and they actually will be, they can actually be found in Arizona. They come as far north as that, and they live, through Mexico and Central America. They're basically a raccoon with a long nose, and they do the same thing. This little family here was rummaging around the back of the little hut that had the hummingbird food. I'm pretty sure that's what he was smelling and looking for. This little guy related to guinea pigs, Central American agouti. They travel around in packs, and this was one of the critters that we saw at the Gamboa place I stayed. I don't know if anyone can tell me what this is, but I did have it actually listed. I was wandering around, and I stop every once in a while and take a look at stuff like trees too. But this is a cashew, and the cashew apple is actually how it grows. The juice out of the apple is actually used as juice, but you cannot eat the cashew on the bottom of that. You see the actual curve there, little kidney bean shape. You have to roast it or it will kill you. So don't ever go and eat one of these if you're down in the Central American jungle. This is the Cherokee. This was the top looking out onto the Caribbean side. This is the wet side. And my guide actually took me through the forest. I was up and down mountains that day like a mountain goat. I was not ready for it, but we did it anyway. So I made it home okay. During that little hike, we had some red-legged honey creepers show up. There's a male on the bottom showing off his pretty red legs and the female up top. This is a rufescent tiger heron. They're pretty common down there. This one is a juvenile and very well dappled, so can hide in the forest for sure. Hard to see. One of the hummingbirds that we see up there, and hummingbirds can live sometimes only above 3,000 feet, only live in the wet side or the dry side. You'll find this guy only in that Cherokee region, violet-crowned wood nymph. So this was my treat to myself for the Summit Rainforest and Golf Resort. It's kind of cool. I met a guy down here who actually moved down from Michigan, and he packed up lock, stock, and barrel. He gets a pension from the U.S. Postal Service, and he lives down here in a house that cost him $60,000. He golfs every day. He drives his golf cart from there to the golf course, and is happier than you can possibly imagine. The neat thing about this is they also had up on the right-hand side, you see where all the trees are, a whole bunch of paths and walking area and all sorts of good stuff there. But my buddy on the golf cart, he asked what I was doing. I said I was looking at birds. He says, well, let me take you. And he says, I got all sorts of stuff out in the golf course. So we took a little tour of the golf course without golf clubs. It was actually kind of nice. This chestnut-headed Oropendola was out there. They actually build a woven nest, just like the weavers in Africa. Noisy birds too. This is a scarlet-rumped cacique. Lots of blackbirds down there, a little bit different here and there. This one has a red butt. There's some yellow ones. There's of course the blackbirds, but we have all sorts of different types of blackbirds down there. And this little guy was running around on the top of the tree, and I had a quick look at him, and they had the little baby sitting on the back. It's a Geoffroy's Tamarin. They're not too common. Some of those smaller monkeys there are not doing well. But it was nice to see this guy, this family. There was a troop of about 10 of them traveling through the golf course. So my total species count for Panama was 204. I got one better than my trip to Belize for the same amount of time. So it seemed to do fairly well there. That's a white-necked Jacobin there. So the last country we're going to talk about this evening is Nicaragua. When we booked the trip to go down, I didn't know how bad it was. This was 2018 when they had shot some students in the streets. It was very sad to hear about what was going on with the government. The people rose up and they had a whole bunch of roadblocks, and the airline actually gave us the choice to turn around and find another trip. Not being smart enough, I said, nope, I'm going to Nicaragua. We got to go see some birds. So we were down there, and there was a couple places that were a little scary, but I got to tell you, the people were still fantastic. Didn't feel really outside of the roadblocks. They didn't feel threatened whatsoever. It was quite nice. They've had a real decrease. I'll show you one place in tourism, and they're dying down there. They've got no money coming in, so it's a little sad that way as well. So we flew into Managua, made our first stop at Apoyo Lagoon. We'll show you a little bit about that. Went down to San Juan del Sur, just above this border down here where you see Colón. That's the top of Costa Rica, and so you're driving along that border for quite a section. they were planning on, I can't remember, the Koreans or Chinese, were planning on making this the next Panama Canal. It's actually a little bit higher up from Panama. It's not so far to go around the Horn. And there's a river that comes out the right-hand side of, this is also called Nicaragua Lake. And so they would just have to dig their way from San Juan del Sur across to the lake to get in there. There's probably still plans for it, but that is, that's something they're talking about still. Sorry. I take my finger off the button, I can't advance it. There we go. Laguna Pollo, I talked about all these. We'll just kind of whip through this. Oh, and then we went north to Selva Negra, which we'll talk about. So Laguna del Pollo is a volcanic caldera. And so this used to be a live volcano, a very large one, and it eventually filled in with water. And it's now one of the places that a lot of the people in Managua go for a weekend visit. There's a lot of cool little places around the outside of this. This is a nature reserve. So really good for birding and checking out other animals. This is related to our belted kingfisher, but it's quite large. It's actually the largest kingfisher we have in North America, Central America. There's lots of kingfishers around the world. There's, I think there's over 100, with the kookaburra as the largest of the kingfishers. This is a Hoffman's woodpecker, feeding babies in the hole. A little bit different, related to the red-bellied woodpecker in the United States. But this is bare-eyed around the outside of their eye there. It's kind of a strange look for a bird. This is the national Nicaraguan bird, the turquoise-browed mott-mott. The reason they call it a mott-mott, that's what it says, mott-mott, mott-mott. And you can hear them through the jungles, and but that's why they're called mott-motts. Beautiful guys. This guy was missing one of his racket tails. They usually have two. So then we went from there down to San Juan del Sur. It's a bit of a touristy place to go. When we went down there, there's all sorts of really cool little places, shops, restaurants, and they were dying. It's beach and tourist, but when I say kind, it's because we were like probably, usually they have tens of thousands of people show up there, and we were maybe one of 10 that were walking around town. So people were begging us to buy stuff. Beautiful place though. Black-bellied whistling ducks. It was very wet there, and that day was no different. But of course, water off a duck's back, right? This is a Cavanet's emerald. Lots of these little hummingbirds around. I really like the picture because of the flowers. This is a female, not quite as bright as the males. This is a neotropic cormorant. We don't have those here. The closest they come is Arizona, and really Arizona is kind of a rare thing as well. They're usually an East Coast Caribbean bird, but they do live in Central America, and they're about half the size of our pelagic cormorants. Quite cute, and they've got these blue eyes just like the rest of them, with a little bit of white around that gullet. Of course, you get your pygmy owls down there. Actually quite a few, surprisingly, and the diurnal. You usually can tell about owls because of the color of their eyes, whether they're diurnal or nocturnal. The super nocturnal birds will have completely black eyes. There were 3 babies here actually waiting for mama to come feed them, and this guy was quite curious. This is my Cleopatra bird. It's a lesser ground cuckoo. It's related to all the rest of the cuckoos, but I love that blue mascara with the blue eyeshadow. So this is an Olive's Ridley sea turtle. We were down at the south end and just kind of hanging around one of the little beaches, and we showed up and there was guards everywhere with machine guns. And so we were kind of wondering what was going on. And we thought, yeah, we'll ask. And they were in this little hut, and what they do is they protect turtle eggs. That's what they do. And it's because turtle eggs are actually a delicacy down in Central America, and people will dig them up and eat them raw. It's gross, but whatever, I guess that's each to their own. The problem is they're actually killing off entire species off the beaches. So they've actually set up enough money, and it's funny because they've got all these roadblocks and strife and, you know, people doing horrible things to each other, yet this thing was still had 6 guards with machine guns hanging around it. But the coolest thing was, for a small donation of $3 American, they let us actually release turtles. They were ready to go, so we came back at dusk and we released 2 baskets of turtles out into the water, and it was a very cool experience. So then Lake Nicaragua, we spent some time there. This is actually, these 2 mounds are actually volcanoes, and they rise up out of the lake in the middle of it. That's why they call it a volcano in a cup. But this is massive, this lake. In fact, it's the only lake that has sharks in it. The sharks are bull sharks, and they actually survive in this lake and travel back out to the ocean. This is black vulture, number 3. I like this picture just because of the coconuts in the background. These are bare-throated tiger herons. Very cool looking. These were actually doing a mating display when I was down there looking at them. Thought that was kind of a cool picture to get. But they're that big throat with that all the feathers. They can suck that right back in and be 3 feet less than they are standing there on the side. Kind of like the green heron does. This is a white-throated magpie jay. Lots of those around. Very noisy, very fun to watch. Got lots of personality. It was a little wet that day, so he's just drying off on the fence there. This is a crested caracara. This is actually, it wasn't put in this family until just recently, but this is actually a falcon. It's one of the largest falcons, and so they've put it back into that family. But there's lots of these guys around, and they like carrion, so they hang around kind of like vultures. That's why you see all of that that face, no feathers on there, because they get their face all dirty diving in. Then we went north and stopped at Selva Negra. Selva Negra is translated to Black Forest. So the guy that actually set up shop here was actually German and lived in the Black Forest, and he thought, I'm coming over to get some coffee and I'm going to set up my own Black Forest. So he actually has a coffee plantation just below this. They got a beautiful little resort on the right hand side with a nice restaurant, but absolutely one of the best spots in the mountains to go birding. Here's a little golden olive woodpecker who would not come out for a picture. No way, no how. He would poke his head out and take a look to see where I was and tuck back in. And so I had to leave him alone because I think they had babies in there. So tried to keep him out of there. This is a bushy crested jay. Lots of different jays down there. They all kind of have their own zone, their own area. We do have a Steller's jay down there. It looks very different than our Steller's jay. But these guys, Inca jays, there's I would say there's probably 30, 35 different types of jays in Central America. There's our, oh, I didn't put that on there right. We all see this guy here at Bryden Lagoon every once in a while. Lots of green herons down there, lots. Walking around the lily pads on the lake there, common gallinule. This is kind of like our coot. We got those big fingers on them, so they can walk around without falling into the water. This blue-gray tanager, I would say by far is the most common of all the tanagers. Little, you know, when you see him at first, he's pretty. They get real boring all of a sudden. No colors when you see the rest of them, and they're everywhere, but they're cool to watch. My total species for that trip was only 110. Didn't do so well on that one. This is a Rufus-backed wren. Great personalities on these birds. So yeah, 110 species there. A lot of them were duplicated from the other countries, but I'm still interested in hitting those other places that I mentioned. So that's the end of our presentation today. Appreciate you guys sticking around and watching. If you want to check out the site, I've got all my pictures from all the different places there, thebirdblocker.com. Any questions?
Mike? Hi, Mike. Excellent presentation. Fantastic pictures. Belize, what time of year were you in Belize?
For all 3 trips, it was between February and April.
Okay, and you drove everywhere?
Everywhere.
And one other question, in Belize, were there a lot of insects?
I wouldn't say a lot. I was on the transition from dry season to wet season. So I think you get quite a few more into the wet season. So if you stick around January, February, you should be good.
Lovely pictures, especially at this time of year to see such beautiful pictures. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Felt very safe in Belize. You know, just the people were super friendly. That doesn't mean that you can't be in a bad area. Right in Belize town, there's certain areas you shouldn't go, but in the countryside, it's fantastic.
Mike,
Yeah.
were you able just to find accommodation as you went, or did you just book beforehand?
I did probably 75 ahead of time and 25% as I went. Typically, I like to get a guide for the first 2 or 3 days just to get myself associated with what's going on. So I'll book a place there. And then as you go, you tend to get to know the locals and they'll tell you where to be.
Right.
Now, on the car rentals, you do have to be careful, but I rented from private people every time.
What do you mean private people? Like just, you asked them if you can rent the car?
Someone had a car on the internet and I rented it off of them. Yeah, and insurance, you got to be careful down there too, because they've got all sorts of scams and stuff. So you can get international car insurance, and I would suggest you do that.
There's no budget rental then?
Yeah, there is. There's a couple. Belize is a little small. They do have a couple places. Panama City is just a thriving metropolis. I would call it no different than a Vancouver, size and bustle. So you have all the regular car places down there, but a lot of European. Panama is quite a European influence.
Any other questions for Mike, folks?
Okay.
I was going to ask, you have the Stellar's jay.
Yeah.
Isn't it named after someone named Stellar? So was he down in that area as well? Or am I wrong?
It is named after someone. It was actually named after a naturalist that hung out with Captain Vancouver, I believe.
That's it.
And he did mostly north. And so when they found the Stellar's jay, it was up north. He's also got a Stellar's sea lion and a Stellar's sea cow, and he's got several things named after him. But the Stellar's jay that comes down into Central America, I'm surprised they don't call it a different species. It looks that much different.
Oh,
okay. Well, thank you very much for your attention, guys. Appreciate it. We'll see you come December. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Gareth, are we in January this year?
It's January the 2nd is the actual day. So that's the Sunday immediately after New Year's Day, of course. So.
Okay.
thank you very much, Mike. That was wonderful, lovely and colorful and very nice. It's nice to see those countries and all those animals. I'd love to go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent, excellent.
Mhm.
Thanks, Mike.
That's
Thank
really
you very
great.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Mike.